All right, whenever you are ready.
Hi, I'm Natalie COF. Now, it was proven many years ago that classical music helps the brain enhance its mental tasks and short-term memory. So, many students believe that it is good for them to listen to music while studying. Now, this is completely untrue. My claim is that modern music disrupts the learning process. My three subclaims are that first, the Mozart effect, which I previously stated about how listening to classical music helps you study, does not apply to contemporary music. Second, the human attention is limited while working on a specific task. And third, music doesn't allow students to focus on studying. So my first claim that the Mozart effect does not apply to contemporary music is proven because there have been drastic changes in the composition of music throughout the ages. In the classical era, music had a smooth, soft melody and a homophonic texture, which is having a single melodic line with accompaniment. Nowadays, modern music has harsh beats, non-repeating patterns, and complex lyrics. So, it is impossible to compare the benefits that classical music has to how modern music can affect the brain. And a study at the University of Michigan proved that whether you are listening to music that you like or dislike, the lyrical abundance hampers your ability to recall information. So, it doesn't matter if you're listening to heavy metal or Rihanna, your information recall will severely be hampered. My second reason is that human attention is limited while working on specific tasks. The Brain Center of America states that your brain can only carry out a limited number of tasks at a time, so it needs to select the most relevant information based on your needs at any given moment. And Dan Kahneman, a psychologist and Nobel Prize-winning scientist, states that one type of mental activity interferes with, distracts from, or takes away attentional capacity from the other. While you're studying, a lot of mental activity is going on. You have input from reading, output from writing down the information you are recalling, and the excess information from music around you makes your brain try and choose what information to retain and understand. And many people believe that while they are studying and listening to music, they are in fact multitasking. That is completely false. Your brain is physically incapable of multitasking. Your brain is actually task switching. Task switching is when it switches from one to the other very quickly, but you're not doing them at the exact same time. Susan Weinschneck, a behavioral psychologist with a PhD and over 30 years of experience, states that each task switch might waste only 1/10 of a second, but if you do a lot of switching, it can add up to a loss of 40% of your productivity. This means that half the time spent studying is a complete waste. And so this is your knowledge, your time, and your resources that are all being wasted just because you're listening to music. My final reason is that the music does not allow you to focus on the information that you are studying. Music is an outside stimuli. It interacts with the brains and the brain's neurons. Dan Vintner, a specialist scientist from ScienceNordic.com, states that processing of musical pulses activates motor areas in the brain, supporting the idea that music and movement are closely intertwined. So your brain, while listening to music, is telling you to get up and interact. It is telling you to move around, and in turn, you are not focusing on your studying. In the same article, it says that the processing of timbre was associated with activations in the so-called default network, which is assumed to be associated with mind wandering. So, while your brain is telling you to get up and start moving, it is also getting you unfocused and off the task at hand. So, I believe that music hampers our ability to learn while studying because the Mozart effect does not apply to contemporary music, our human attention is limited while working on specific tasks, and that the music does not allow students to retain information. Thank you.
Right, Natalie, I like the way that you start off talking about how people might be using the Mozart effect to justify listening to music. That tries to establish that there's some controversy on the issue. You got a clear statement of what your proposition is. The layout of the secondary claims is pretty clear, although I think there is a little bit of a problem with the third claim because it sounds pretty much like a repeat of the second claim. Although I do think that there's a difference between those points, it needs to be clarified by the phrasing of that third secondary claim. You signpost pretty well on the first point. There's basically no evidence on the first point. You give a description of what classical and contemporary music might sound like and what some of the differences are, but the notion that those differences are particularly significant or important is basically treated as an assumption, and I think that's probably not too hard to go to look at the research on the Mozart effect to have an explanation from those researchers that talk about why they think this has any particular effect and why other music wouldn't have that. You may have had some research that you were citing there because it sure sounded like there was an authoritative description of the factual differences between the types of music, but you don't give us any source citation on it, so that seems largely an assertion. A reasonable assertion, but one that I think could use a little documentation. The second point is very clearly explained, the whole discussion of multitasking versus serial or concentric tasking or task switching, as I guess the one scholar talks about it. I thought that was pretty clear. There's good testimony on the information describing the differences between the two. There was even some statistical information, although I'm not sure what that's based on, that suggests that 40% of the time might end up being wasted, which sounds like a good way of quantifying the point that you're making there. The third point I do think is distinct because there's evidence that talks about the music having basically a unique distracting quality to it. To me, I think that might be the simpler way of expressing that phrase, saying that music is not only a distraction, but it is a unique distraction. And that would be a little bit clearer than the sentence that you have there, which sounds like it's, some scientific explanation, but is not clear necessarily to the average listener. If they're paying attention to the evidence, they'll probably get that, but I think we talked about this a little bit before. People are lousy listeners. You sometimes have to lead them along by the nose, and that's one of the places where I think you could have done a little bit stronger job on that. All right, thank you.